Hello all, this is Dickie again. You've probably seen my other two videos. If not, we're going to talk about Creole identity. The most important thing is that Creoles are Creoles and Creoles are not African Americans. There's a big difference between the two. Although we are all people from ancestral Africa, we are a little different in the fact that we're all not the same. We Creoles are not African Americans, and African Americans are not Creoles. And I'll see if I can explain that to you. Whether you know it or not, Louisiana, not only the state but the territory, was a separate country before the Louisiana Purchase. And that country was owned and controlled and was a French territory. And it was called New France, similar to Canada prior to the American Revolution. And the people that lived and inhabited that territory spoke French. They were citizens of France, and they lived under a special code and culture. In essence, they were basically Latin people. Latin people in the sense that their ancestral history goes back to the French enslavement and the French conquest of parts of Africa. America at the time was probably not even an independent country, which it was soon to be. But the American country, the United States of America, the colonial Americans, was an English-speaking country, and the people that lived in America at the time were slaves, if there were free people, and I'm sure there were a few, were slaves under the English crown. The people of African descent, the Mulattoes, the mixed race, the Creoles, were subjects of France. Many of them, in fact, were citizens in the sense that they had rights. And I explain that to you as well. And that's why African Americans and Creoles are different. Back around in the 18th century, the Spanish and the French, whom at different times owned or controlled the Louisiana territory, laid out a set of laws. They called them the Black Codes. And those Black Codes were, in effect, rules that were put in place to control the slaves and to actually, in a sense, allow the slaves a little bit more freedom. In Latin countries, African slaves and slaves of other nationalities, if that was the case, were treated humanely. They only worked 6 days a week. They had their Sundays off. They could attend church. The families could not be separated. They could actually work in their time off. They could enjoy their religious beliefs, although they were preferred, and the people at the time preferred to have them belong to the Catholic faith. There were a lot of things they could buy their freedom, which many of them did. They manumitted their ancestors, and they bought their ancestors so that they can free them as well. And because of this, they were able to make a lot more progress. They were citizens in the sense that they had special rights. They weren't full citizens because of the fact that they were of African descent. But they could not vote, but they could own a business. They could protect their laws in the court of law. They could sometimes carry arms. They could do many things that slaves couldn't do at the time. And because of that, they were able to make more progress, able to develop themselves at a much faster rate and become a little bit more freer. In the sense, America did not allow that to happen to their slaves, and even to the free people. So because of that, these two different cultures evolved in a different type of environment. So what you have is you have now Creoles, even though it's some 200 years later, maybe 100 years later, you have now Creoles that used to speak French. Some of them still do have a different culture. They don't, they're a little bit more family orientated. They are a little bit more religious orientated towards the Catholic faith. They have more of a Latin type of value. The family is a little bit closer knit. We have a history. We're able to go back according to records and identify with our ancestors. And we had a little bit more of a special culture which really hasn't gone away. Of course, we've been in America and we are assimilated to the, if you want to say, African American culture, but we haven't forgotten our Creole culture. We haven't forgotten our French ancestry, and we haven't forgotten our past. And because of that, we act and we think a little bit different. So therefore, I'm telling you that because of that major difference, it separates us from the African American. As far as the name is concerned, the name African American is not indigenous. This name came into being during the 60s, during the time of the black revolutionaries and radicals and the Black Panthers. As I mentioned to you in my other video, that caused the government to rethink its policy towards African Americans, especially after the Civil Rights Movement, and kind of classify us all together, especially after 1920, when the one-drop rule went into effect, which means that anybody with one drop of African blood was considered to be black. I never bought that, and Creole people don't bought that. Before the one-drop rule, we were classified as a separate race of people. Mulattoes, Creoles, and mixed-race people were considered to be separate. It shows up on the birth certificates. It shows up in the records back in the past, and they enjoyed a three-tiered society, basically a society between white and black, in which they were separately identified, and they were basically separately, classified. So why would someone want to give that up? Because they are going to please someone else and self-identify with a culture that doesn't basically belong to them. What I'm saying is that if you want to be an African American, go ahead and be one. There's not a problem with that, but Creoles are not African Americans. We're a mixed race people. We enjoyed a separate identity, and it was unfair, and it was cruel, and it was unjust for this government, this country to take our identity away and put us in a category and put us all together. This is something that people of color need to understand. We are indigenous people. We don't know anything else but America. I mean, whether you're from your ancestors are from England or from France or from Africa, you were born right here. I mean, you're not like a Mexican American. You don't come from Mexico. You're not like an Italian American. You don't come from Italy. You come from right here. This is the land of your ancestors. You have more right to be here than most people in this country. So you should be proud of that. I am. I don't want to be anybody else. We are one of a kind, and we've been dogged, we've been stepped on, and we've been abused for over 300 years. And I'm going to go the way of my ancestors, and I'm going to continue to be proud of what I am. And I'm not going to let anybody else in my lifetime decide who I should be, what race I should be, and who I should identify with. Again, the difference between Creoles, mixed race people, and African Americans is that we are separate, and we are a separate people. We are not just black, and we're not just white. We're both black, we're both white, we're part Native American, and we're, especially Creole people, have a Latin culture. So that makes a big difference, and you just can't take an ethnic group or nationality and you decide who they should be and what color they should be and whom and where they should belong. It's unfair, it's unjust, and until people realize that, until people stand up and become proud of who they are, you're going to have this problem in your life. Forget about what happened in the past. That happened during the time of slavery, and it was wrong, but right now we have our choice to be what we want to be, and I'm going to be a Creole and not an African American. I'm not denying my black heritage, and I definitely am not denying my white heritage for anyone. Thank you very much, and may God bless you, and I'll talk to you later, hopefully sooner than later, but may God bless you and have a good day.